بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم ألهمنا مراشد أمورنا وأعذنا من شرور أنفسنا. Last week we spoke of the narration when Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam saw them asking for something which had some sort of resemblance with the people of shirk. The end of the narration, which comes in other wording, we explained it. The translation we made was incorrect last week of the one part where the wording comes that until such a time will come. One is that if someone in the past had to make jima with his wife on the road, then you will also do that. And the other wording that came was, and if someone from the past had to enter juhra dabbin, the translation we made was the den of the bear. That is the incorrect translation. The translation is the hole of the lizard. If you had to enter the hole of the lizard. The dab is a big lizard. The Arabs used to like it. In the one part of Arabia, they used to enjoy it. It was like the dish. This is that dab which Khalid radiallahu anhu was eating. And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam looked at it and he was like, then Khalid radiallahu anhu offered. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said no. Then he said, is it haram? He said, not haram, but meaning in the cities they would not eat it, but it's a very unique, like how we have chameleon, something similar, a little bigger. And perhaps it's a unique wording of the narration. We explained how the drug den is. We mentioned like the bear. It's the same thing like this lizard also. The dab is such that when it's outside in the sun, its color is different. It got that like shine, it got that more glow. And as soon as it goes into its den, meaning into its hole, then it becomes dark. Like its real color comes out. It's a very vicious, and with its tail when it slashes, but its color outside is different, its color inside. But the translation we made of the bear, that was an incorrect translation. Dab with the dad, it is the, I don't know exactly what's the English of it, but it's from that family of the lizard. The next narration that we will speak about today is the new chapter after Kitabul Fitan. It is known as Malahim. Malhama, some say it comes from Lahmun. Lahmun means meat. Because in Malhama, so many wars that there will be so much of meat hanging, so much of flesh hanging. Others say that it comes from Luhma. Luhma means the one part we call of the cloth, you call it the warp, and then you get the sada or suda, that's the weft. Meaning how you make your cloth, one part goes this way, one part goes this way, that warp and weft, whatever they call it, intertwined, whatever. It means so much of war that everyone will be going into everyone. This is Malhama, Malahim. That the attack is not like one side, but from everywhere. Normally war is like that. But when the war goes full, then you don't know from where the person is coming. You're busy here, then you have to turn that way, you have to turn. This was known as Malahim. That full-scale wars. So the second and third narration in this chapter is the narrations we will discuss, Kitabul Malahim. In the second narration, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam speaks about one of the biggest wars that the Muslim Ummah saw. And in the third narration, it is one of the biggest wars that the Muslim Ummah we seeing and will see. The second narration, the wording is, Allah's Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "La taqumu as-sa'a." The hour will not be established, means Qiyamah will not come. Hatta tuqatilu qawman, until you will fight against a nation. Ni'aluhum ash-sha'r, whose shoes will be of hair. Other narration shows that their clothing, their shoes will be hairy, of hair. وَحَتَّى تُقَاتِلُوا التُّرْكِ, until you will fight the Turk. So normally when we hear the word Turk, we think immediately of Turkey. Because our mind normally will go to that Turkey. So Constantinople, Istanbul, Turkey, what we know today, that got nothing to do with it. Turk was a very huge group of people that stayed in the world. And still, and the people of Turkey also once upon a time were from this Turk. But Turkey was never. Meaning Turkey is a land that those who conquered Istanbul or Constantinople and they made it Istanbul, then that entire thing after the conquering became known as the land of Turkey. But that was never the land of the Turk. So the land of the Turk is very huge. It could encompass many types of different people. In the one book that I prepared, which is known as Zulqarnain and the Yajuj Majuj, we wrote of the different tribes. It could go all the way from Germany, from one side, it could go all the way to Korea, North Korea, South Korea, that entire, including Russia. All of them, some way they link up to this nation which is called the Turk. But in this hadith, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was speaking about one particular group. Ni'aluhum ash-sha'r, that their shoes you will find it is of this hair. Some say it was the leather of the beaver. Whatever it was, we never saw those people. Allah saved us. But those who saw the hair also. The Mongolian nation. That time, now you don't call them. Mongolia became known as Mongolia because of them. They were known as that time as the Mongols. Allah's Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam described them in a unique word. He said, Sighar al-a'yun. They will come with their small eyes. So it was hard before you saw the group, but when you saw the group, the muhaddisin at that time said, we're seeing them like. That's why it was famous once upon a time, like you got Chinese eyes. They had that small, Sighar al-a'yun, very small eyes. Sighar al-a'yun. Humr al-wujuh, and they would have that red face. So you have to see them. Nowadays it's not hard because someone just puts on like, it's not nice to see pictures. Islam has always discouraged pictures, but these people's pictures are all over the world. So you just write Genghis Khan and you see his picture. Amazing, he'll come with a red face also. Red, small eyes, red face. So at that time, ulama who saw them said, this is that nation. Sighar al-a'yun, humr al-wujuh, Zulf al-unuf. Different narrations got different wording, but this narration got that their noses will be, this Zulf will be explained in another narration. The explanation of the whole, the summary of the whole thing is that their noses, the Arabs used to like irtifa, like the nose at the top here where the bone is, it comes out slightly. Theirs would like go in. It would drop and then here at the bottom it would like come out. So where the bone is, it would go in, it's called inkhifad. The Arabs liked irtifa, that it comes out, it sticks out. Theirs would go like in. And then when you come to the nostrils, then their nostrils would be like puffed out. So that was their nose. And he said, كَأَنَّ وُجُوهَهُمْ الْمَجَانِ, meaning how it's like sitting so flat. He said, if you look at their faces, you will think their face is like a shield. Al-mutraqa. On top of the shield, someone like puts some flesh, or you put some layers. Some said it means very fleshy faces. So you had to see them to understand. You could have pressed a little bit on the cheeks if they gave you the chance to see what it was. But when this Genghis Khan started and when they ended, it was a time when the Muslim Ummah practically had no hope. When they entered from their lands in about 1220, the English calendar. So he must have been born maybe about 30 years before that or 20 years, but whatever it was, in about 1220 he made his first battle with the Muslims. 1220. And a lot of the empire he took away. Worst of it was about 1260, 1256, 1260, where what we call Halagu Khan came and they entered into Baghdad. And then their own historians, Muslim historians, no one was there to count. Some say between 250,000 Muslims. Some say it went up to 800,000 Muslims. That in that space where Baghdad was leveled, destroyed. So between 1220, when the surge of the Mongols came in the Muslim Ummah, it was never the Muslims who were fighting the Mongols. It was the Mongols who were fighting the Muslims. And the Muslims were just running. After they sacked what is known as Baghdad, then the news came of one of the leaders who died, so Hulagu Khan had to go back to his lands. And then he left like one of his ministers, that now it's only Egypt left, when everything has been done. There's nothing left. So if there's only one Egypt left, now you just go. So at that time, the Mongolian leader, he wrote a letter also. The letter was that whoever stood in front of us fell to the ground. The mighty Khilafat fell to the ground. There was no Khalif at that time. Whoever stood in front of us and our swords fell to the ground, you rather also just give up. Look at the narration how it said, Hatta tuqatilu. Until you will fight them. So the Muslim leader at that time, he made a pact with another leader, and two of them then wrote to the Mongols that don't worry of coming to Egypt, we are coming to you. It was the first time that the Muslims went out. They met at that place called Ain Jalut. They came from Egypt, they came from above. It was a time that the Muslims had lost hope. Muslims had lost hope. Even the Mongols had lost hope that the Muslims could ever win. It's like that it's called. That's why when they went for that battle, they never bothered about anything. About finding out where the Muslims are, where they're hiding. It was like, this is the last. Hatta tuqatilu. Until you will fight them. That was Ain-e-Jalut. It was the first major defeat of the Mongols. Perhaps you can call it the first real defeat. And thereafter the battles with the Mongolians continued. So it started from 1220 and it ended in 1320. For 100 years they fought this qawm. 1220 was the hard days till about 1256, 1260. And then Muslims fought and they started winning, and then in, out, in, out. And Allah made it some of the Mongolians accepted Islam. So 1220 was the beginning of their war with the Muslims, and by 1320 was like the end of the war. But that 100 years, but the unique wording, hatta tuqatilu at-Turk. Till you will fight them, and the Muslims fought them. And how they came out at the ending. So that 100-year period. At the time when the battle started, no one ever thought the Muslim Ummah will ever survive. The next narration that comes is, and that Genghis Khan, why he is known, Genghis means the great Khan. It was a laqab title given to him. His name wasn't Genghis Khan. He was known as the great Khan because they say he established the biggest empire the world had ever seen. So he had to be someone with what a mind, with no support around him, from nowhere he stood up. Whenever these people stood up from nowhere, we said they have definitely had shayateen around them. They had a lot of shaitani elements around them. He knew where to go, he knew what to do, he knew which place to attack, he knew who was plotting against him. He had a lot of shaitani help. Greatest empire the world had ever seen, Genghis Khan. And Allah's shan it was that amongst his grandchildren were those who accepted Islam. Amongst his grandchildren. A lot of Islam came after that into them. But mightiest of the empires of the world, no one thought they would ever stand up. They even write, normally when they write, they say Genghis Khan and his empire was on the verge of conquering the world. But when he asked that what stopped this Mongolian empire, so then they'll say, no, one group in China, this group. They'll never say the Muslims stopped them. They'll never say it. But that's what broke them. Islam stopped them in two ways. One is they themselves became Muslims. And after becoming Muslims, their own internal war started. Meaning the non-Muslim amongst them with the Muslim. That brought an end to it, broke that empire. And others is Muslims who are not Mongols, they stopped them. But the history books will always try and show who stopped the mighty empire, and they look for someone in China. Biggest empire. The next narration then speaks about the next biggest empire. Allah's Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "La taqumu as-sa'a hatta yuqatil al-muslimun al-Yahood." The hour will not be established until the Muslims will fight against the Yahood. Until the Muslims will fight against the Yahood. At the time when Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said this, before that there was the battle with the Yahood in Medina Munawwara. And then they were defeated. After Allah's Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam's passing away, there was no Yahood to fight. There was the Christian empire, mighty Roman empire. There was the Persian empire, mighty Persian empire. It was two unbreakable empires. The Yahood was like a small group. So it was not something big to say, until you will fight, until the Muslims will fight the Yahood, it will be like the Roman, the Persian. Allah's Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, you will fight. Jaziratul Arab, you will take over. He said, then you will fight the Persians, you will defeat them. He said, you will fight the Roman, you will defeat them. This narration was then speaking about the final. He said, when the Muslims will start the battle with the Yahood, the hour will not be established until it starts. The battle with the Yahood, what we understand, started in 1948. It was known as the beginning of the first Arab-Israeli war, 1948. So you can't make qiyas on history. But if you want to take a chance in the dark, you will say the Mongolians were 1220 to 1320, 100 years finished. Mighty Mongolian empire, but they couldn't pull more than 100. Hardly anyone pulled more than 100. The Crusaders couldn't get more than 100. The Mongolians couldn't get more than 100. So if 1948 they battle with the Muslim starters, then if they pull the most, then we tell them the longest you got to is 2048. So then if you give up faster if you want. 2048. No one ever pulls more than 100. Until the Muslims will fight the Yahood. حَتَّى يُقَاتِلَ الْمُسْلِمُونَ الْيَهُودِ. And it was exactly the same. When the war started at the beginning with the Mongols, it was called, it's impossible to defeat them. When it started with the Yahood, the 5-day Arab war, from so many angles Arabs fell onto that Israeli group, and how they defeated them all, or that 6-day Arab war. And after that, just becoming more and more and more stronger. The aid of Britain, the aid of America, the untouchable Yahudi. But in the last few years already we saw that every time the untouchable Yahudi is trying to touch, he is pulling back after that. He attacks Gaza again and again. It was many years ago. I gave a lecture somewhere and I spoke about that. There's a secret in Gaza. There are certain lands which we know a lot about. One is Makkah Mukarrama, one is Medina Munawwara, one is Al-Aqsa. Those 3 lands got a unique secret in them. And we all call them that these are what is called the harams. The 2 are the harams. Aqsa is not a haram, but majazan if you want to. The haram of Aqsa, but it's called the Holy Land, Al-Ardul Muqaddasa. But in the book that I made a summary of what Qari Muhammad Tayyib Sahib Rahimullah tried to say of Al-Muqamat Al-Muqaddasa. He tried to show Gaza, that how does Gaza feature as a unique land. So then after that I wrote another book, Where is Mount Tur? To show this, where is this Gaza? And what relationship Mount Tur has with this Gaza. It's a very long story. Something to read, but where is Mount Tur? But at that time, a while ago, it was perhaps about 15 years now, maybe 10 years ago, when the Israeli forces attacked Gaza. And recently they attacked, but we're speaking about the one before that. So at that time, some friends, they heard the bayan and they came and said to me that, you got a lot of hope in Gaza, it seems. But we just came from there. Those people in Gaza got absolutely no weapons. Israel has now decided to enter on foot. He says there's no way they're going to survive the next month. neck way. And how many years ago that was it? We remember one article we read that time, that after Israel pulled out its soldiers, then one of those senior men, before he died, they wrote his last sentences when they asked him, how did you lose that war? How did you lose it? Because why did you all pull out your men? So he became very upset with the reporter and he said, everything is a lie, everything is a lie. He said, they told us no soldiers, no soldiers, no soldiers. But as soon as we entered, the mountains were filled with those white soldiers. As soon as we entered. So that was that time. Recently again they entered Gaza. How much they bombed, how much they bombed. You know what they said? Every day how many jets were sending, how many bombs. I told someone, calculate so many jets, so many bombs. If each bomb even had to kill 5 people, there'd be hardly left the amount of bombs they dropped. But Gaza still carried on. So we start building again, start building. How many bombs they dropped. Gaza, unique land. So at one time they were called the untouchable Israeli army. And as the days are going, they are scared to touch anyone. They are scared to touch. So how the Mongolians, when they started, they were untouchable. But the barrier starts coming up. When the barrier starts, then it still gives them chance. The barrier is already coming up, that's pushing Israel back. But the whole thing completes normally in up to 100 years, 90, 100. So the end is coming and it's coming very fast. Hatta, the hadith then says, until the time will come, يَخْتَبِئَ الْيَهُودُ خَلْفَ كُلِّ حَجَرٍ وَشَجَرٍ. Until the time will come where the Yahudi will have to take refuge. He will hide behind every rock, every tree. Whatever can protect him, he will go running. فَيَقُولُ الْحَجَرُ وَالشَّجَرُ. The rock, the tree will start saying, O Muslim, O servant of Allah, here's a Yahood. Ta'al faqtulhu. He's behind me, come. Illa al-gharqad. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, there will be one tree which will not talk. It is known as the gharqad tree. He said, فَإِنَّهُ مِنْ شَجَرِ الْيَهُودِ. Year of Baqi'ul Gharqad, the Qabristan. Baqi'ul Gharqad, Makkah Mukarramah. There was a gharqad tree there. Because of that gharqad tree which was later cut, and the Qabristan was made at that time, it was known as Baqi'ul Gharqad. Some people, because we live in a modern era, they feel it very hard to understand, how will this narration work? Because where do rocks and trees speak? And because we haven't seen miracles, so our mind is that you can't have a miracle. So in the modern era, you have those people who made a new translation of this one. And time will tell now which translation was right. It's a unique translation they made. They said until a time will come when the Yahudi, the Jew, will have to hide behind every rock and every tree. So they said every rock and every tree is like a metaphor. Means wherever they can hide behind, whoever they can seek their protection. Whether you got the heart of a rock, or you got the sympathy of a tree. Meaning nice country, hard country, they'll take refuge. But a time will come where all the countries will become fed up with them. It's a unique translation, like they said. All the countries. Al-Hajar, even the hard-hearted countries. Was-Shajar, and the soft countries. All of them will say, oh Muslim, here behind me in my country is also Yahudi. Then you have to ask them, then what's that illa al-gharqad like? Except the gharqad. So they said, except USA. فَإِنَّهُ مِنْ شَجَرِ الْيَهُودِ. So it's a unique translation. Like everyone got their chance. So whether that translation is what was intended, or although Islam has never shown open miracles, but we know that this battle will take place right at the ending. This is like the end. At the end there will be the miracle that Muslims will see. They will see Isa alayhi salam coming down. They will see him being supported by angels. It will be a time where Muslims will see miracles. So because it will be the end, Allah Tabarak Ta'ala has made this ummah that miracles are not shown loudly. Otherwise there's no imtihan. But when the time of the imtihan ends, then miracles can be shown very big. So it's nothing hard at that time for the rock and the tree to speak on the permission of Allah. Just because we don't see it, because we're living in Darul Imtihan. At the time of imtihan, miracles are not allowed to be loud. Otherwise there's no imtihan. But nothing stops it. When Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's da'wah started, he would hear the stone behind him saying, Salam to you, O Nabi of Allah. It is nothing hard that the ending of the ummah is like the beginning also, where the rock again will speak. So time will tell, but whether you take that meaning or you take like the real meaning of the wording, it's understood that their time is coming. And very fast it's coming. When that person wrote to the Egyptian minister, when Halaku Khan came, there was the Khalif of the Muslims, the Abbasi Khalif, Mu'tasim. So he had a Shi'i advisor, Ibn al-Alqami. The Shi'i advisor told him that instead of trying to fight this group, instead of having so many soldiers, get rid of your soldiers. Like cut from the army. And I have already made a deal with these Mongolians, these Mongols, that so much money we will pay, that money we're using on the army which is not going to fight them. So much of money we will pay it over to them. And the Khalif, he fell for the Shi'i lie. He trusted the Shi'i and the entire Khilafat came to the ground. He trusted the Shi'i. Halakuka came and he wrote to the Khalif that all that high walls, you yourself must open it up. I want you to break this, I want you to break that. The trenches that are there, you must start filling it. The Khalif gave in to him. They prepared Baghdad before he came. And then whatever promise he made, where is this shayateen ever going to fulfill a promise? Later on, the Khalif was also killed. They had a system, these Mongols, that if you royal, you will die being trampled under the horses. So sometimes they would put you in a carpet, roll you in a carpet, and then they let the horses come. And they will say it's a royal death. They will even tell the person, I can't just kill you like that, it's against your shan. You must be killed under the horses. So you will like feel happy, thanks. Of their nature. Very brutal they were, extremely brutal. He gave up it. When he wrote to the Egyptian leader responded that we will come ourselves. We will come out to fight. Hatta tuqatilu. This ummah has that same two phases. There was one group who heard the word Yahood, Jewish lobby, American backing, British backing, impossible to fight with them. The easiest way is let's make a truce with this company, with these countries. And as long as they heard the lie of the Shi'i, grandsons of Ibn al-Alqami, everything went haywire. As long as they fell for the lie of the Shi'i. But at that time, when Muslims understood that you have to pull away from the Shi'i, that's when the war was won. In today's time, when the Ummah will start realizing you'll have to pull away from Shi'i influence. It has to be understood that they might be my minister also, but they're not ours. They could be our minister also, but they're not ours. And by Allah's fadl, in many countries, a slight awareness is being created that you are your own person, but you're not ours. A few years ago, it was known as one and the same. There was a time when we were young, when the Iranian revolution took place. At that time, scholars around the world jumped. They jumped for Khomeini's Iranian revolution. So the question was, but not only Khomeini, even before Khomeini, this entire land has become a land of the Shi'i. Shah Ismail, what they call him, Ismail, who brought Safawi, who brought Shi'iyyat into the land. The land of Iran was full Sunni. At that time, the Turkish, Istanbul, what we call, and Turkey, they used to send their children over to Iran to study the Sunnah. Because this was the land of the Sunnah. And then the Safawi Ismail entered, and he had a definitely shaitani backing. And how he took over those lands and he changed the entire Sunni Iran into Shi'i Iran. And then for years, whenever the Ottomans were trying to move front, it was this Shi'i who was stabbing them. But everyone knew it. Everyone knew it. But when Khomeini made his revolution, the Khomeini revolution, scholars around the world forgot this. And they said, okay, the Shi'i, but let's not make the Shia story a big story. At least someone has stood up today against America. At least someone. Scholars around the world applauded. They wrote. Allah Tabarak Ta'ala blessed certain scholars who started reading Khomeini's books. And they said, even if he's standing up against the mighty America, this man is not our man. And when they wrote it, the Iranian Revolution, it was like a shock for scholars to be able to say, I have to pull back from all the bayans I was giving. They were giving big bayans that there's a revolution starting, support the revolution. The Shi'i will never be ours. From that time, people are waiting for the war of America against Iran. From that time. The war of America against Iran. And whenever something would happen, we would hear certain scholars saying, and soon the time is coming when America will attack Iran. And every time I said, that time has never come, and it will never come. Never come. Recently when I went to one country, they told me that after Ramzan, America said they're attacking. I said, I heard this 10 years ago also. So much of barakah in their time. So much of barakah. They don't attack. Iran carries on speaking loudly. America carries on speaking loudly. In between they say, okay, Iraq, let's go to Iraq. We'll sort you out later. They say, let's go Afghanistan. We'll sort you out later. They never came back to Iran. Never came back. Never sorted out. The Shi'i will never be ours. Ibn al-Alqami was the minister and the whole Khilafat fell. But when he wrote to the Egyptian leader, he said, we will meet you. We will come out to fight. And they went out. Ain Jalut, they went out. They went out with a nation who had a word, it is either Ghazi or Shaheed. Either we fight and we win, or we fight and we martyred. But we will not be killed. The difference between being martyred and being killed, although it is martyrdom, one is that before this everyone was telling the Mongols, we give up. And as soon as they were going to the Mongols were still killing them. After they gave up. And this group said, we will come. This wording, حَتَّى يُقَاتِلَ الْمُسْلِمُونَ الْيَهُودِ. Normally in Arabic, the one that is more stronger, his will be the main fa'il. Although قَاتَلَ يُقَاتِلُ got both ways. You say, يُقَاتِلُكُمْ, they will fight against you. It means you'll also fight against them, but it means they'll be stronger. يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ فَيَقْتُلُونَكُمْ. They will fight against you in manners no one fought. Speaking about the first group that came to destroy the Umayyad Empire. يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ. When Allah's Nabi said, you will fight against that qawm, meaning you will fight against the Mongols, they fought against them. And he said, حَتَّى يُقَاتِلَ الْمُسْلِمُونَ الْيَهُودِ. The time will definitely come when the Muslim will fight the Yahood. Meaning there will be a nation who will be ready to stand. And no longer only when you attack us, then we will just... But a time might come where we will come for you also. Whoever has studied knows the day will come. May Allah Tabarak Ta'ala let that seed already be planted in the heart of Muslims around the world. That Mubarak to that first Jamaat who stood up against the Mongols. They gave life to the world of Islam after that. Mubarak to the second Jamaat who will stand up against the Yahood. They will give that new life to Islam again. حَتَّى يُقَاتِلَ الْمُسْلِمُونَ الْيَهُودِ. Until he goes running. May Allah Tabarak Ta'ala make all of us amongst the selected men of Almighty Allah, in the selected Jamaats of Almighty Allah. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.